Good morning. It is Monday, July 31st at about just after 4 in the morning. Wow. I'm Larry Cedar. I'm back with you for another session on scanning, spelled S-C-A-N-N-I-N-G. Scanning is the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. That's the goal. That's it. So we're going to get right into it. We're going to start with 3 deep breaths, followed by 15 seconds of absolute stillness and silence, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the technique. But let's just take 3 deep breaths, followed by absolute stillness and silence. Here we go. For 15 seconds. Absolute stillness and silence, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. So what we're doing in these sessions is we're moving from a state of contraction to expansion. Contraction, squeeze your hands together. Expansion, release. In life, we vacillate between 2 basic processes, 2 basic forces, and that's true of the entire universe. Contraction or expansion. Anything in the universe at any given moment is either a more contracted or more expanded phenomenon. So we tend to be more contracted. We are, as human beings, a contraction. We're the bringing together of substances, flesh, bone, molecules, air, ego, personality. This is a contraction. It's all brought together. And when we die, when we pass on, we expand. We move back into the materials from which we came. We tend to be more intent on contracting as human beings. That's the way we get things done. We make things, we advance our agendas. We tend to forget how to expand. We become overly contracted, and then we feel bad. So if this is the contraction-expansion continuum, we're trying to move from contraction into a more expanded state until we are centered. We start with breath because breath is expansive by nature. We follow that with stillness and silence because stillness is the opposite of action and doing, which is a contraction. And silence is the opposite of thinking and speaking. So we're moving ourselves into a more expanded state incrementally. We're going to now do 5 deep breaths, followed by 30 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. So you see we're advancing ourselves towards an expanded state, gradually, incrementally. 5 deep breaths, 30 seconds absolute stillness and silence. Here we go. Last one, as deep as you can. 30 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. So you've basically learned how to scan at this point. Breath, stillness, silence are the foundation of scanning. We're going to move from that into what I call the nuts and bolts of the technique, which is the actual incremental muscular release, which further moves us into an expanded state. But we start with breath, stillness, silence, breath, stillness, silence. You can do that for 5 minutes. You can do that for an hour. You will begin to notice, and it's very important that you pay attention to where you're at physically, emotionally, mentally, as you do this process, you'll begin to notice a slight shift, a slight change towards an expanded state. When you're overly contracted, you feel bad. Why? You're obsessively thinking, your body is tight, you're emotionally constrained. As you move towards a more expanded state, your body relaxes, your mind clears, and you feel more emotionally free. Now you can determine for yourself what form contraction takes in your body, in your being. Every one of us is different. I know how I contract. I get obsessive about the thoughts in my head. I can't stop thinking about things. My body gets tight. I will feel emotionally constrained. I'm very aware of what that feels like. And so as you train in scanning, which is scanning the body, looking for these pockets of contraction, you become more aware, more studied in your own body, and you begin to notice the difference between how you feel when you're contracted and how you feel when you're expanded. You become, you might say, a student of your own being, and you begin to study and understand how you work so that you can more readily navigate this life and monitor yourself and, in fact, alter your state of being through these simple exercises. So we've moved now slightly out of contracted space through the breath, contracted space through the breath, stillness and silence. We're incrementally moving. And remember, you can't expand and contract at the same time. So any expansion is of tremendous value because you've stopped the contracted process. To expand, you must stop contracting. So you may go back to contracting. That's our nature. But if you've begun to expand, you've literally reversed the river. You've caused the river to run in the other direction. So it's great. So any amount of expansion is great. So now we've done 3 breaths. We've done 5 breaths. We're going to expand even further. 7 breaths and a full minute, 60 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. Here we go. Deep breaths. And oh, by the way, I always mean to mention this. Don't ever do this while you're driving, or as they like to say, operating heavy machinery. If you get dizzy, you might feel a need to kind of stop for a moment. You don't want to be driving and doing this at the same time. You want to be completely focused on the road. But when you're sitting in a chair, this feeling of disorientation is natural because you're breaking out of your contracted state into a more open, aware, conscious state. So it can be disorienting, but you want to be seated in case you get dizzy. And the dizziness is temporary. It's only because you've been holding your breath. Your body goes into a bit of shock when you begin to oxygenate it so intensely. And it's adjusting. That's okay. 7 deep breaths, 60 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Here we go. Two more, deep as you can. Last one. 60 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Deep breath. And just monitoring for a moment how that change feels. How does that make you feel? How do you feel different having expanded? And you have expanded. If you've taken a breath, you've expanded. If you've sat in stillness and silence, you've expanded. So how does that feel? Take note of that so that you can remember the next time you come to scan or expand that point of reference. It's very important to realize and to kind of remember this. because you can't expand and contract at the same time, it's just a fabulous phenomenon. It's amazing because of that fact, you may find if you're upset sometime, or you're obsessively thinking about something, or you're very tense, or if you can just find a way to expand in any way, shape, or form, either that be a deep breath, stillness and silence, or what we're going to do next, which is the release of muscular tension, even that microscopic expansion will stop the contractive process. Now, you may not feel instantly better or amazing, but you have begun the process of expansion, which has stopped you from contracting even in the most microscopic way. Now you're going to expand on that expansion, and you're going to continue to release muscular tension and go even more deeply into the expanded state. But the important thing to remember is that just by starting, take a breath. Simple as that. Sit for 5 seconds in stillness and silence. Release the tension in a muscle in your body. You will have begun to stop that process. And if you can learn to trust that, the contractive process, and if you can learn to trust that, then you'll begin to have in your mind that I can always get myself out of trouble. I have a tool. Now, it may not feel like it's working at first, but if you trust it and keep expanding, keep breathing, keep sitting in stillness and silence, keep releasing muscular tension, it will move the dial. And again, we're trying to move from an overly contracted state into an expanded state until we are back at center. Okay, so we've done the preliminary steps to scanning. And again, it's called scanning because we're ultimately going to scan the body for pockets of muscular tension to be released. We've begun the preliminary step, and now we're going to move on to what I call the nuts and bolts of the technique, which is the incremental release of muscular tension. Now, you can take any or all of these aspects to this technique and use them, any of them. Expansion takes many, 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 many forms, and we know this because there's things we do in life to expand instinctively. Anything that makes you feel good or more relaxed, you're probably expanding. And I could list a million of them, but you know what they are for you. We tend to gravitate towards what I call chemical expansions, unfortunately, because they're not so healthy for you, having a drink, smoking a joint, taking a pill or something like that, because we don't feel we have the power within ourselves to expand. We have to give it over to some other chemical or substance to expand us. But you could do it yourself. And when you learn to do it yourself, it's very empowering. You don't feel dependent on external processes. You have it within you. So practice and see what it does for you. Now we're going to get into the incremental release of muscular tension, which is how we started this session by saying scanning is the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. So all we're doing is going through the body and releasing muscular tension. So just to start, just to give you an idea, take your hands and squeeze them together very tight, really tight, like use your strength. So that's contraction. Now, contraction is not a bad thing. It's only when we become out of balance, overly contracted, or even overly expanded, that we get into a bit of confusion. So this is strength. If I have to grip something and pick it up or carry something or shake someone's hand or anything, this is my strength. Contraction is strength. Contraction is the ability to advance an agenda by bringing forces forth to the forefront by using those forces. So this is great. Now, as you see, as you continue to hold your hands like this, your hands start to get a little sore. If you held them like this for 10 minutes, you'd start to maybe feel some real kind of discomfort. So that's an example of how we become overly contracted. This is what happens in life. This is too much thinking, too much worry, too much physical tension, too much emotional constraint. We need to do the opposite to get back into balance, and that's expand. So how do we expand? Simply release muscular tension. On the count of 3, release all the tension in your hands. Follow that by a deep, deep breath. 3, 2, 1, and release. Take a deep breath. So you just moved from a contracted state into an expanded state. Just note how that feels. And that's all we do all day. We contract, we expand. We contract, we expand. When you are stressed, when you're working too hard, when you have issues in your life that you're obsessing about or worrying about, you tend to be overly contracted. All this is a tool, scanning, to allow you to bring yourself back to center through expansion. You never have to worry about expanding too much. I mean, I probably contract 90% of my day, 95% of my day. It's hard to get myself to sit down and do a scanning session because contracting is the way you get things done. And we get used to that. And we begin to think that if I stop contracting, if I stop doing, if I stop thinking, I'll somehow sink. If you're like a swimmer and you got to keep swimming, you think if you stop swimming, even for a second, you'll sink. Your life will sink. But you'll find that if you stop swimming, you may just be able to float. Float for a moment, catch your breath. Experience the buoyancy of the water, relax your body. Lie on your back, look up at the sky. So you can afford to expand and relax. You just have to remember to take the time. By building a consciousness of this continuum, you become more attuned to where you're at in any given moment in your life. Am I more contracted or more expanded? If I'm overly contracted, how about I take a moment to bring myself back to an expanded state? Now, I want to take a moment to mention something just occurred to me. A lot of times when we are stressed or unhappy or whatever, we gravitate to something which we think will make us feel better. Distract us maybe, who knows? We'll go to the internet and we'll surf the internet for an hour, or we'll turn on TV. And there's a thing that I've noticed in my life, and I'll only speak for myself. That's like putting a placeholder. You don't expand when you watch TV or surf the internet. You continue to contract because you're focusing on this thing. You're having to stay focused on this thing. Focus, concentration. So a lot of times you'll come away from having watched an hour of TV or surf the internet or not feeling really relaxed at all and wondering why. I just stopped working and I kind of distracted myself with something for a while because you didn't take the time to really, really, really let go and do nothing. So consider that sometime. And I have a problem with this. When I'm stressed, I always want to go right to the internet and just start to read the news and look at interesting items and things. There's one site in particular that shows you the interesting videos of the day. I get caught up in that. And when I'm done, I feel like I don't feel any better, really. I just feel like I kind of held that contracted state. So consider sometime when you're about to go do that thing that you do when you're stressed, instead scanning. Try it. You may feel tremendous resistance because when you begin to scan, what you're telling your body is you need to stop contracting. You need to let go of all the things you're thinking about, all the things you're worrying about, all the agenda you're trying to advance. And sometimes that feels like dangerous. If I don't keep doing thinking, I will, in a weird way, die. Like a shark, you got to keep swimming, otherwise, but that's not true. So experiment with scanning, experiment with putting it into moments, those moments of your life when you feel like you need a break or you feel stressed or something. Take a moment to scan, 5 minutes. Take a deep breath, sit in stillness and silence, and then this, the nuts and bolts of the technique, the incremental release of muscular tension. And we started by squeezing our hands together and releasing. So we're going to initiate that process throughout our body. We're going to find pockets of muscular tension and release them. Thereby expand. We're moving our body into a more expanded state. The side benefit of releasing muscular tension is that it affects the entire body, the entire being. If you're having obsessive thoughts, as your body begins to move into a more expanded state, your mind begins to move into a more expanded state. You find yourself letting go of those obsessive thoughts and feelings which you've been holding on to, just like your muscular tension, and your mind clears. So let's start. We start with what I call zone 1, the face. On my count, release all the muscular tension you can in your face. And if you're not sure how to do that, just think about it. 3, 2, 1, and release. If you're new to scanning, what you want to pay attention to is, how did it feel to let go of the tension in my face? What did that feel like? Well, I feel a sagging sensation. Like I was like this, and now everything drops. My muscles are no longer holding up the expression on my face. They're letting it go. It's like when you power down a robot. You turn off the power. You're turning off the power. That's what that snap is. You flip the switch. The energy that was energizing those muscles to contract and form an expression or hold, you turn off the power, so the muscles are just going, you turn them off. Muscles can either contract or expand. It takes energy to contract. It takes no energy to expand. Turn off the power and let your muscle just go. The face, 3, 2, 1, and release. Feel that feeling? Now I will tell you, if you are in a highly contracted state, and I am frequently in a highly contracted state, you may find it very difficult to let go of your muscular tension. You may have to repeat this 5, 10, 15 times. The body is very determined to hold on to its contracted state. Just keep knocking at that door. Incrementally, look for the smallest change. Did I release my musculature 1%? 3, 2, 1, and I felt a little change. That's all you need. The smallest expansion counts. This is a cumulative process. You can add a penny and a penny and a penny and a penny. Eventually you'll have $1, then $10, and then $500. Trust the incremental nature of this process. In fact, it's what makes it easy, because you don't have to release your muscles a lot to expand. Just release them a little. 3, 2, 1, and that's it. You did it. We move to zone 2, top of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. And that's kind of like, I call it the thinking cap. When you release the muscles in your head, your brow drops, everything relaxes. It's almost like you've stopped thinking. You've just turned off the power to your brain. So that's a very effective area as well. 3, 2, 1, the top of the head, and release. Deep breath. Always take a deep breath when you feel the impulse to take a deep breath. Your body is now moving into an expanded state, and breathing is very much a part of that process. Your body, I always say, is like a puppy you're trying to train. You've taken it to puppy school. You need to tell it what to do. Once you have gotten through to it, it'll follow your lead. Top of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. Deep breath. Never hesitate to take a moment of stillness and silence if you think, I want to stop for a second. I just want to sit. Do it. A lot of scanning has to do with giving yourself permission to do nothing. Giving yourself permission to do nothing, to just be. We tend to have a sense of obligation to be thinking, to be doing, to be worrying. We tend to feel like we must always be contracting, advancing an agenda. And that's natural, because to survive, you must contract. That's actually good. You know, a person who's very motivated to succeed is very good at contracting. That's good. That's how you accomplish things. Until you get to such a point where you're overly contracted, and then you are not doing yourself any favors. You need to balance yourself out by expanding. So tune in. Zone 3, the back of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. Zone 4 is the neck. 3, 2, 1, and release. Did you feel that muscular release? It could be very subtle. It could be large. It could be a big difference. Tune in. See how it feels. 3, 2, 1, the neck, and release. Take a deep breath. And another. Continuing into the shoulders. Let them drop even a millimeter. 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, 3, 2, 1, drop the shoulders and release. Deep breath. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of times this scanning practice feels like work. And the work, for me, is that I'm up against my own resistance, my own contracted nature. The contraction in me wants to keep pushing back to contraction. So I'm having to really focus, really concentrate on letting that go. It's not a physical labor as much as it is a focus and an intent. The challenge of bringing yourself out of this very contracted state, which is habitual, which is a place of security and safety, which is reluctant to let go. So it takes concentration to scan. But the great thing is the more you practice, the better you'll get at it. And I always like to say that I've been doing this for years. And when I start, if I'm lying in bed and I'm all wound up and I'm trying to get to sleep, so I decide to scan, I face tremendous resistance. It's only from doing it for so many years that I just said, what the hell, I'm going to do it anyway. I don't let my resistance deter me. Don't let your natural resistance to expanding deter you. Take it as a sign that you've really come up against your contractive nature and move past it. This is the challenge of scanning, moving past your own habits, moving past your own instinct to continue to hold on to those thoughts and feelings and muscular contraction. Move past that. Take a deep breath. It's funny to me sometimes how challenging it is to move to a place of simple nothingness. What's hard about doing nothing? Letting go of muscular tension. It can be very challenging. Once you're there, you'll love it. You're going to want to go back to it. As hard as it is to scan sometimes, once you've experienced an expanded state, It's like bliss, and you're going to want to go back to it, however challenging that might be. Again, that's another reason to practice, because you're building a consciousness of what it feels like to be expanded. You have a reference point. You've done it enough. Let's say you've done it for, hours or days or months or years. You know what it feels like to go to that place. You want to get back to it. You also know how challenging it can be to get there, but you don't mind because you know the payoff is tremendous. Zone 6 is what I call the plate of armor, the chest, stomach, and front of the waist. Carry a lot of tension in all these areas of your body, but focus on this one now. On my count, let go. 3, 2, 1, and release. Take a deep breath. Now you're getting into areas that a lot of times have an emotional component. If you've been contracted, you've been holding. You've been holding your breath. You've been holding your emotions. You've been holding your muscles. As you start to release these areas, you're freeing the emotional component of your being. You may start to feel emotional. This can be happiness. This can be sadness. It can be tears. It can be laughter. It can be a tingling. You're taking off the cage, the muscular cage, so that your body is free to function as it wishes. There's a free-flowing aspect to your being now, and that includes all those emotions you've held or buried. So you get into the chest. Obviously, we feel things here. You might start to feel something. Again, don't be discouraged. Move through that. Feelings are only bothersome when they are constrained or held, or when they're emerging. They're a little scary. Once they're free, they're fantastic. Chest, 3, 2, 1, and release. There you go. Take a deep breath. And again. Stillness and silence. And if you find yourself thinking all kinds of thoughts, what am I doing? I'm not doing anything. What is this accomplishing? Well, doing nothing is scanning. Doing nothing is expansion. You're coming to a place of nothingness, emptiness, zero, calm, still, peace, quiet. That's an expanded state. A lot of times, all those voices in your head are contractions. If you find yourself thinking, questioning, worrying, those are contractions. When you're in an expanded state, you're not thinking anything. And that's the beauty of it. You brought yourself to a clearing in the woods. There's nothing there but you. And you begin to experience the beating of your heart, your breath, the sounds in the room, the comfort of just sitting and doing nothing. I can't speak for anyone else, but I know for me, that's a wonderful thing, because I spend most of my life in the opposite direction, thinking, doing, working. So for me, it brings me into balance. Zone 7, down the back, past the waist, and into the all-important pelvis, the pelvic region. Now, you may find you've never really thought about the state of musculature in any of these areas. I've never thought about my pelvis. Well, start to tune into it, because the musculature is the key to expansion. If you can learn how to release muscular tension in every part of your body, you will move yourself into an expanded state. The pelvis is an area of a lot of concern and worry and tension, because it's the area of sexuality and, if I may say, waste elimination. It's an area that we have great concerns of embarrassment, loss of control, too much control. So if you find yourself going, this is weird, that's okay. You're used to holding in all areas of your body, including your pelvis. So letting go can feel strange, but try. 3, 2, 1, the pelvis, and release. Just see what that feels like. 3, 2, 1, the pelvis, and release. 3, 2, 1, the pelvis, and release. It's a letting go. Again, every part of your body you've been holding, and you're letting go. And every time you let go, you move yourself that much closer to an expanded state. Take a deep breath. Another. One more. Stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. Zone 8 is the feet. You're going to go down the legs, across the knees, and into the feet. Think about your feet for a moment. Focus your energy. There's an amazing phenomenon you might want to explore. And it's a very healing phenomenon. If you focus on an area of your body that's perhaps giving you trouble, pain, discomfort, tension, whatever, if you focus, close your eyes and focus on that area of your body, you may begin to notice a slight throbbing sensation. You can direct the energy of your body to different parts of your body. And again, this is very much a part of what scanning is about. It's learning to become sensitive to tune in to your own body and how you can alter and change it just through sheer decision and focus and concentration. So think about the feet and see if you can induce a slight throbbing in your feet just by thinking about them. So think about your feet for a moment. And what's going on is you're telling your body that this area needs attention. So the body responds by opening up those blood vessels. The blood flows more freely to that area. The blood is carrying oxygen and nutrients. So it's a very healing, process, and your feet begin to throb. And this is something you can do in any area of your body. If you're having neck pain, back pain, feet pain, knee pain, anywhere. If you just lie down or sit still and just focus your energy on that area, you're directing your body to, in effect, heal that area. So my feet have begun to throb. So now I'm aware of them. I'm much more aware of them. So now on my count, release whatever muscular tension you can in your feet. 3, 2, 1, and release. And if you think of your foot almost as a fist, which is unclenching, again, if this is unfamiliar, it's because you're new to it. If you practice this, it will become more familiar. The feet, 3, 2, 1, and again, the feet, 3, 2, 1, and another area that we're afraid to let go of because, the musculature is our guard. It's our suit of armor. We're very vulnerable as human beings. I mean, we could be pierced by a weapon, let's say of the old days or whatever, very easily. And we're aware of that on a subconscious or conscious level. So we contract our muscles as an armor. If you've ever seen someone say, punch me in the stomach, go on, I can take it. And they'll tense up his stomach and the guy will hit him and he'll be fine because he prepared. So you're on a subconscious level always preparing yourself for battle, because life can be scary and threatening and, challenging. So you have this subconscious level of tension you've held throughout your body, including your feet. And the side detriment to that process is it's exhausting. As I said earlier, it takes energy to contract a muscle. 3, 2, 1, release. I'm using energy. I'm not using any energy. So if you can imagine, you're holding this low level of tension throughout your body all day, all night. You can imagine how exhausting that is. And you get to the end of a day and you go, all I was doing was sitting in the chair at my office, working. Why am I so exhausted? Well, because in dealing with the day, you are holding, mentally holding, physically holding, emotionally holding. So that uses energy. So you're exhausted. So when you scan, when you release muscular tension, you free up all that tension. Your body no longer needs to exert that energy, and you may find yourself having a lot of energy. You'll feel more buoyant, more energized. That's why sometimes you go on vacation, you suddenly have tremendous energy. You've dropped all that tension. So the feet, 3, 2, 1, and release. And hopefully as you continue to move yourself into a more expanded state, you will find that you just in general feel better and have more energy throughout the day to do the things you want to do. Deep breath. Another. Last one. 15 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. If you feel a tingling, that sensation is you opening up. It's a very good sign. And at any moment in this process, if, these sessions are sort of a guide for myself and anyone who happens to be here. I do these sessions as a reinforcement of the technique for myself, as well as for educating people about this technique. But it's important to remember that this is something I developed for me. I share it because I think there's a commonality about this. I think a lot of people experience the same thing. We're all human beings, But as you begin to practice this technique, as I like to say, it's highly customizable. Do it in a way that works for you. If you feel like sitting, when I say, take deep breaths and sit for 15 seconds, you feel like sitting for 5 minutes, sit for 5 minutes. Follow your own instincts. Get to know your own expansive state, what that feels like. Get to know your own contractive state, what that feels like for you. The only thing that we really need to share and have in common is that we're moving from a contracted to an expanded state. And we can all do that. We all share that. And that's all I really talk about. But find how that works for you. And practice, 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 practice. Because we contract most of the day, we're very good at contracting. What we've lost touch with is our ability to expand so that we can counter that contraction. And again, I want to end on this note by reminding you that contraction in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's an excellent thing. As I said yesterday, some of the most contracted people in the world are the most successful. If you look at a professional athlete, and I used the example yesterday of a gymnast, when you think of what a gymnast can do with their body, this is all them contracting, making a decision to use their body in a certain way and bringing their musculature together to do amazing flips and turns and things. It's incredible. So that's how you get things done. That's how you succeed in life, is through contraction. I do a series of monologues, as part of my acting practice. I have to learn those. Those are contractions. I have to hold on to those words. That's fine. That's great. Contraction's not bad. It's how we get things done in life until you become overly contracted, because what we want is a balance. We want to be equally expanded so that we can come back to center and be, as the expression goes, a centered person. You have a wide dynamic range. You can contract very powerfully, and you learn to expand equally powerfully. To acquire that tool that brings you to a place of nothingness. If you can get really good at that as well, then you'll have achieved balance and you'll have a very wide dynamic range, and you can achieve a lot. One last deep breath. And that's it for today. I will post this session on my Facebook page and leave it up for a while. I also post it permanently on the Scanning Facebook page. I used to call it Scanning, SQANNING. So if you do a search, it might still be that way. I'm trying to get it changed. But now it's just scanning the body for pockets of muscular tension, SCANNING. And that's it. Have a great day. Bye.